Escape to the metaverse, but act like you know. Yeah, you are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. Yeah, you are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Okay, Brian, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show.
Hi, Matthew. Hi, Rizzle. How you doing?
Great, man. Pretty good. Really excited to get into everything you're doing with CherubsDAO, but I'm wondering if you could get into a little bit of who you are, what you were doing before you started CherubsDAO, and then dive into all the really, really groundbreaking, important moves you're making to set up CherubsDAO. That would be a great way to get started.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. So who I am. So I've been a software entrepreneur for a very long time now, for over 20 years. I've started my first company in Web 1, which was a web marketplace in the late 90s, business to business marketplace that we had a nice successful exit from, and rolled that into a business to business Web 2 startup, and then followed it up with a mobile application startup. And so I've got a lot of experience starting and running, building, growing, and having a variety of different exits with software businesses. And I kind of look for new platforms. Web 1, Web 2, and mobile were all new platforms. And I took a little bit of a detour for a few years with an executive mind from my third company who is really strong on the retail side with Starbucks. And we had a company that licensed a couple brands in the sports and health and entertainment from the U.S. to take into the China and Asia market. So I spent several years traveling, especially in the China and Southeast Asia, developing a brand called Fast Med and one called Top Golf in the Asian markets. And around 2019, moved from Austin, Texas, where I'd done my prior startups, to Zurich, Switzerland, and definitely had been paying attention deeply for a couple of years about blockchain and blockchain technologies as a user investor, and really was convinced that this was the next platform. And it kind of fused with my personal interests with a new startup to get back into the technology business, to build a software opportunity on a new platform like blockchain. And it fused with a personal desire to solve some challenges that were presenting themselves to me with one of our children and some of the health issues that are related to a condition she has called Down syndrome. And I just decided at that point in time I wanted to start my next opportunity on blockchain with crypto, and focus it specifically on health and related illnesses that come from the condition of Down syndrome. And I formed Cherubim Labs at that point in time, 2019, when I moved. And I've been on this exploration ever since, and we're about to put our first projects into the market.
Dude, I love people who are sort of like exploring like different industries and ways to use blockchain, like outside of the it's hard to even say conventional, like, because the space is still so young, but like I feel like not a lot of people are trying to sort of dive into the direction that you're heading into. When you started this, and even now, are there other people who you can sort of like model this after, or are you like totally on your own, sort of like blazing this trail, or like, you know, what's sort of like the playing field that you're in?
Yeah, great question. There's no direct model that I've found, but there are things that I try to learn from. So I've been doing this since 2017. You know, while in parallel with my licensing business, I started looking at this. I said, you know, I just feel I feel blockchain and crypto is going to be this next big platform. I can't put exactly my finger on it, why, but what I got fascinated with was the ability to, on a global scale, coordinate people and capital in ways that we've never been able to do it before. So these mechanisms were really what got me interested. And so I started thinking, like, how do you apply this to advancements in health and cures to, you know, to conditions, or even the healthcare system itself? And, you know, it was a mental exercise for 2017, 2018, and participating in a lot of the ICO craziness at the time, just to educate myself. And I felt like it was way too nascent. And so a few models were there at the time, but nothing that really resonated with me. And when I kind of got back around to it in 2019, certainly by 2020, the maturity level of the platforms, the layer ones, the tooling, and some of the mechanisms were there. And, you know, for example, with CherubsDAO, our first project that's coming out, there's nothing related specifically to health that I modeled after, but I did see an NFT mechanism around the Nouns DAO project with a daily auction and on-chain governance with the NFT tokens, and one NFT as one vote. Well, there's something interesting there on a mechanism to raise a pool of capital using NFTs. That's interesting to me, that we took as a model for what we're doing with CherubsDAO. I've seen a couple other projects around trying to tokenize health data or tokenize genetic information. Nothing that I took away from that specifically, other than, yeah, that might be interesting at some point in time, but I'm not seeing how that's working just yet. So I look and study a lot of different mechanisms. And before I got to CherubsDAO, my first foray into this to try to drive funding toward cures, which we can get into, was to try to use some of the DeFi mechanisms and the yield that was coming out of, you know, places like Yarn, or, you know, in the Terra ecosystem, the Anchor protocol. I said, well, if you can get consistently high yields, maybe that's a way to pool up money and try to fund cure development in a different way. And I kind of pivoted away from that because I just questioned the sustainability of some of the yields, but it was a mechanism that I did look at. So yeah, it's more trying to study other mechanisms in other parts of the crypto market, because there's so many fascinating ways that again, the people and capital are coming together to pursue missions. And that's kind of the foundation I'm looking at. Like, my mission is around curing, you know, these diseases, and specifically in our case, dementia and Alzheimer's. So I'm looking at the mechanisms that do a great job of organizing the right people and capital to come together and make really good decisions on a global scale.
Before we dive into how exactly CherubsDAO plans on kind of combining the framework that Nouns DAO has laid out in terms of governance and being able to pool immense sums of capital to help solve the problems that dementia and Alzheimer's and other like brain-related health issues present. I'm just curious if you could kind of like present a little lay of the land when it comes to the current state of scientific funding and research, and sort of like the pain points involved there in terms of raising capital, focusing it on specific avenues and things like that, just to set the stage before we kind of dive into everything CherubsDAO is doing.
Yeah, it's been an educational journey for me. So my youngest daughter is she is the child that we have with Down syndrome. She's now 10 years old. And so when she was born, and we found out about the Down syndrome diagnosis, you know, of course, like, just went deep and tried to understand everything about Down syndrome. And there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the things that immediately jumped out was that Down syndrome effectively functions as an accelerated aging. You if now that we have people with Down syndrome that are living long enough lives because we've solved some of the simpler medical issues. I say that they were complex medical issues, but they've been solved with modern medicine. We're finding they age at an accelerated pace, which leads to an early onset of Alzheimer's. So immediately I was like, okay, well, that's about the worst outcome I can imagine for any person and their families. And I knew of it as a dreadful condition already. And so I'm diving into, well, what's the state of Alzheimer's and what's the likelihood we're going to see a cure or a preventative set of therapeutics to help people with Down syndrome live even longer lives. And it turns out that it's one of these conditions that's received billions and billions and billions of dollars of funding for decades, and very little progress has been made. It's the only major disease without a effective therapeutic or cure. Cancers, we've got different ways of dealing with cancers. It's still not solved, but Alzheimer's has, no effective therapeutic or cure. Finally, a drug had been approved recently, but there's still question marks of its effectiveness yet. And so I was like, well, why is that with all this money and all this attention and tens of millions of people in the US and globally affected by it? And when you start peeling the onion back, my opinion is it's a combination of problems. And I've consulted with people who do research in this field and raise money. And I do get consistent feedback from them as experts that you have centralization of funding. So the funding for Alzheimer's research comes predominantly from a couple sources. One's the National Institutes of Health and other governmental bodies around the world. And then you've got one or two major foundations. I think in Alzheimer's, it's predominantly one. And then a little bit of funding in different places. And so when you get it done that way, those bodies decide what they're willing to make grants for. And what ended up happening in the case of Alzheimer's is there was a hypothesis called the amyloid hypothesis, which said if we can take these things that build up in the brain, which, are plaques, from amyloid and tangles, with tau, and we can find a way to go after that and take them away and reverse them and clean out the brain, I guess, is probably the way they were thinking about it. Then we can cure Alzheimer's. And it just turns out this is such a massively complex condition once it starts taking hold that going after it when it's that late stage is an extremely difficult problem with multiple variables, and they're not having much success with it. So essentially it becomes a failed hypothesis when you're saying, I need people to live longer and not come down with Alzheimer's. So when I summarize it, it's like, well, we have centralization of funding, and essentially when you get into it, it's like who's making those decisions? They end up being relatively small committees around scientific groupthink. And so you got billions of dollars that go for decades to one hypothesis, no adventurism. Like you think about it, you step back, you say, well, why wouldn't you fund something as challenging as this that requires a lot of innovation across a lot of different fields, more like venture capital as opposed to a centralized, corporate decision structure? And it just hasn't happened. And so you fast forward to where we are today, and little pockets of funding from frustrated people who are trying to solve this problem in different ways have come out, and you'd see we've had some advancements in diagnostics. Well, good, because if you can't diagnose Alzheimer's until after the person's dead, it's really hard to prove that you got an effective cure that's going to get approved by any regulatory body. We have advancements in alternative hypotheses. Like there are some that are showing there may be a viral aspect to this that ostensibly could be a preventative, could be a vaccine. We don't know yet, but there's scientific evidence coming up, and it just these centralized bodies were not recognizing these as viable research pathways, and then other viable research pathways were not presenting themselves in a way that got accepted. And so they were starved of funding. And that was the problem. So it's like, I think a venture capital approach or a democratized approach is like, let's let more flowers bloom. Let's take a lot more shots on goal, and let's get a little bit more edge, like in our exploration of research opportunities. and you're probably likely to find pathways that you didn't expect to do this. So that was Alzheimer's, and it was interesting because I know people who have been frustrated in the field of autism spectrum disorder, and even in post-traumatic stress disorder, and the same story kind of played out, where it's like centralization of funding, lack of exploration of edge cases, have really ignored some viable hypotheses that are now finally getting explored.
Yeah, dude, I spent a very large part of my career working in nonprofits and can completely empathize with the like larger portion of what you're talking about in terms of like, sort of like the centralization of funds, like holding back, potentially productive ways forward. So I really commend you for what you're doing, man. It's a tremendous like undertaking or, paradigm shift to even start pushing things in this direction. So probably now is the time, man, to dive into CherubsDAO and, how this, seeks to start solving those types of issues.
Yeah. So this gets back to crypto, and blockchains and crypto economic systems. Like my thesis with Cherubim Labs was, to be a venture studio, if you will, focused really on health that can look at how these mechanisms can be applied to health that organize people and capital on a global scale toward, specific missions. And so CherubsDAO is the first shot at this. And, when I looked at autism and what was happening there, and I looked at the PTSD and the ones that had a couple breakthroughs that were a little bit less mainstream, and then some of the efforts that have come up in the Alzheimer's field. What struck me was people had ideas like this to say we needed this alternative approach. In fact, one's a good friend of mine from business school who's doing this in autism, and he's been published in the Wall Street Journal calling for a venture capital style approach to funding autism and research in particular. And what I noticed was all of them were going down the traditional structure. They form a foundation, they start raising capital behind it, and then they start, developing a way to decide what research to fund. So it's all 100% nonprofit driven. And the observation out of that is it's no matter who you are, foundation, knocking on doors, doing fundraisers, it's just a heavy lifting exercise, and you get small dollars over time. And I'm like, this is more like a moonshot type problem. We need something that's global scale. We need something that can not, raise 10, 20, 30 million and do it at $1 million or $2 million a year. We need to be able to do something that can do this in the billions of dollars and can do it globally and can do it in a more open, democratic way and even in a capitalistic way. And so what CherubsDAO is its ambition is to try to do that, specifically focused on brain health and dementia. And we're doing it through, like I said, that Nouns DAO style mechanism and NFTs. So we created we created our own NFT art. I think it's really cool around the cherub itself. And so the cherub, is meant to be an angelic figure. And, its art kind of dates, I think, back into the Renaissance, and it's pudgy babies with wings and bows and arrows and some different takes on it. But we decided to just take a completely modern approach to the cherub and put them on a mission, give them a lot of coolness and diversity, and make them a little edgy. And so we've created this artwork. And then we use the Nouns DAO model. So fundamentally what CherubsDAO is a global moonshot to go after cures and preventatives to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. We do it as an impact fund. So it really functions as an impact fund. We sell memberships to anybody that wants to be an active member to go on this mission of solving dementia and Alzheimer's. They buy their membership through a daily auction, which we host on our website. You get an NFT, you get a Cherub NFT when you purchase the membership. So you buy an NFT, Your funds fund the treasury, and then your NFT serves as a token that governs the impact fund. And so on a daily basis, so the CherubsDAO sells NFTs daily. We sell a new membership every day. We get new funds from that membership sale every day. And so it becomes perpetually funded. Then we take that pool of funds, and the impact fund is doing two things with it. One, it's seeking solution investments. So it makes investment seeking ROI and impact in the area of advancing cures, therapeutics, and protocols for Alzheimer's and related dementia. And part of the proceeds are used as a grant to nonprofits pursuing research. And so we're trying to fund primary research, and we're funding ROI-based investments for solutions. Now we've set this, it's 80% toward ROI and 20% toward nonprofit research. Part of the thinking on the nonprofit research is that we're seeding, future investment opportunities that will come out of the research and the people working on it. And that's only part of it. It's regenerative then, so it's perpetually funded through the daily sale. It becomes regenerative because the returns that come from the impact investment come back into the fund and don't get distributed. They get reinvested. And again, they get reinvested on an 80-20 basis. And there are reasons for that too, but this is the structure we've laid out. And so the goal is, over time, this will be a multi-billion-dollar globally coordinated initiative to develop cures, therapeutics, and other protocols against dementia, Alzheimer's, and promote healthy brains, and fund the primary research to do that.
It seems like everyone and their mother and father and uncle and aunt is talking about starting a DAO or has started a DAO these days. But most of these DAOs are really just a bunch of internet friends in a Discord, like having a good time.
Yeah.
Everything that is supporting and backing and the framework around the CherubsDAO is, into my mind, and as we discussed before, a better way to approach DAO creation and formation. I'm just wondering if you could kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of how you structured this DAO, the relationship with the IRL entity in Switzerland, all of those parts, because there's so much more that's going into this than a good idea, taking a model like Nouns DAO, raising capital, putting it to good use. There's a lot of other moving parts here that I'm curious if you could kind of unpack for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a work in progress. So we're in the pre-launch phase. We're in the community building phase. We're really eager for people to follow our Discord, follow our Twitter, get involved, and help us think through this, because it is complex, and we're trying to get this absolutely set up to succeed. So I've been, I'm a member in the Bankless DAO. They've got a legal guild. I've gone in there and spend a fair amount of time in there. I'd like to do more. I just don't have it. I follow Aaron Wright and a few others, and really trying to study how do you set up these DAOs to be able to function in a way that can scale and serve their mission, especially with something like this. So we're trying to. We need to be able to make investments in companies. Some of those investments are going to be for, some could be in crypto protocols, some are going to be in private equity deals. So we need to be able to engage in legal contracts. We'll need to be able to hold positions. We'll need to be able to make grants to research organizations that are nonprofit foundations that are pursuing research. They need to be engaged with an entity that they know that's legitimate. So it's not just about the money. And we need to, we're expecting people to come in and pay reasonable prices for memberships, because the memberships are in my opinion, worth a lot. And they need protections, legally and everything else. So what we've come up with a wrapper that's a Swiss association, and there are a lot of structures in the U.S. around DAOs that they're using LLCs, and I know why they're doing it on the investment side, but it does come with a lot of restrictions to use an LLC and some tax reporting issues that we didn't want to have to deal with. The Swiss association structure best represented kind of what I was looking for, which is a cooperative, and but it's a legal entity, a formal legal entity that serves as a cooperative. And so by doing that, the DAO is an association, is essentially a Swiss association, and therefore you're buying a membership in that association, but the legal entity is the association and the taxing entity is the association. And so that allows our members to get the legal protection. It allows the association to engage in the legal contracts that we need, and it allows for a taxing entity that we can manage the taxes of the association as well, and not have to distribute that down to the individual members. And so that's what we've done. And so everything kind of sits at the association level. The restriction that gets applied to it from a DAO perspective is you do need to cede the governance to the executive board and the assemblies of the association, and it can't be everybody. And so we will have an executive board that is the one that's engaging in the contracts and doing all that. We'll have an assembly that manages and elects the board and deals with the articles. And that'll be the restriction. So, after, let's say we're doing daily auctions, and after a year, we have 300 members in there. You're not going to have a 300 member board, and so everybody's not going to be part of the board. But we have put stipulations in there that with the on-chain governance, that the decisions of the membership will be implemented by the board, so long as they're not illegal, unethical, or off mission. And those are the best guidelines I can apply to it. And illegal, is obvious on the surface. Unethical is, we've got a significant percentage of or somebody's trying to drive money to their brother's research organization or something like that, and without merit. And then against mission, obviously, we've got a pretty clearly defined mission, so we're not going to be funding something, that's way, outside of the brain health arena. So that's the structure we put in place. And, with DAOs, I've seen my observation with the DAOs, the ones that have done well have not gone complete anarchy with governance from day one, where it's, everybody just kind of running and voting. There is some centralized control, or guidance, I shouldn't say. I hate to use the word control. You've got purity of mission, you got purity of founders, and they help guide the DAO to the point where it becomes self-governing. And so that's what we're planning to do with the CherubsDAO Association. Is yes, I will have a voice in appointing that executive committee and the assembly, and we'll have specific people on there that can help shepherd this to being an effective impact fund for its mission. Then over time, as the DAO demonstrates its effectiveness, the cherubs themselves can start electing assembly members and board members from the community directly, and people will develop their reputations for earning those spots. And I think that to me feels like an effective wrapper for a DAO of this type.
Dude, going back to what Matt was saying about DAOs being like people just hanging out in Discord. I'm like, dude, you're going about this the wrong way for the space. You're supposed to just set this DAO into orbit, and then you go, oh shit, we got to figure out the legal framework for it. That's the classic DAO method, at least up until 2021 or so. Dude, totally. On a serious note, though, man, you have given this a ton of forethought, and genuinely impressed with the depth of knowledge that you have heading into this whole project. in terms of like the, talking about like NFT structure, NFT drop, like membership rollout, help me understand this approach with like the Nouns DAO model. Because I like genuinely am struggling to understand how this isn't like the NFT like membership version of like Money Machine goes burr and just like, infinitely cranks out like, stuff that, is, perpetually inflationary and everything. And clearly there are models that are making this work very, very well. Nouns DAO is obviously like a great example. So there are also like tons of different options of, how to roll this thing out. I'm sure you've like looked at them all. As a skeptic, man, help me understand like why this is the model you guys chose and, how it fits better than some of the other ones.
Yeah, the Nouns DAO model got me really interested because it just with the daily auction, I'm like, this is really interesting because it's a slow build of a community, and so you're getting people that really want to be part of it, want to be part of the mission, and you're adding one a day, and they're paying a premium for it, and it's when you look at successful NFTs, they do the 10,000 profile picture drops or 10,000 NFT drops. It's 10,000 NFTs, and a couple have become really significant and immensely valuable, like Bored Ape Yacht Club. With Nouns, it was interesting. I'm like, well, if you can get a community that's so passionate about building what I think they're doing is building a global brand around this artwork. Paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, and I don't worry so much about the perpetual inflation because it's a noun a day, and to get the 10,000, I mean you're close to 30 years out, and so that doesn't seem to be a huge issue, especially if over those 30 years you're putting that treasury to great use and it's growing in value. Essentially, the value of every new noun is kind of the value of the treasury plus the additional money that you're putting in. And so it almost sets its price based on how effectively the community is governing its own treasury and making investments and growing value. And so that's what got me excited about it, as opposed to just a big drop and then let's go figure out what to do with this pool of money and try to build a roadmap around an NFT. I was more in the camp of I want to build a perpetually funding community and establish a premium value for what we're selling and what we're actually doing. And the thought being that with a daily auction, we will be getting high quality. Like when I look at it, I'm like, I can really get super high quality members, in the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 over the first, couple months, very actively engaged and build a sizable treasury. And then we can demonstrate we actually know what we're doing with this treasury and it's likely to grow even beyond just the daily sale. And that's why you want to be a member of this. And, the dilution really isn't an impact because the DAO itself is growing its own value with the use of proceeds. And so it's accretive really, and you're buying your way into something that's generating fantastic returns by itself. So that was kind of, that was the only NFT model that worked. And it wasn't necessarily that I had to do like other people had said, well, why not do this a different way? Why use NFTs? And that was an interesting question too. And I like the NFT because it also serves as a promotion vehicle for our cause and our mission. So by buying a membership in it, you can demonstrate that you are officially a member of this. And when we do amazing things like invest in things that are curing, or preventing, certain onset of Alzheimer's, for example, or having a material impact on that condition, your NFT literally says, I am part of this group that did that. And that's huge, right? And then and we can even get that artwork involved in the research organizations that and use it in ways that we haven't thought about yet to maybe help them attract other research funding for their for their mission. And so I think the NFT gives me a canvas that I probably can't even imagine what we can do with, but I do like the social significance of the, demonstrating your membership in something that would be as impactful as this. And so that's why we went down the NFT route versus just a token model. But I did want, I liked the way the governance of the Nouns DAO just formed. I liked it with the quality of the memberships, the quality of the discussions, the depth of discussion on proposals, the engagement, and it felt like that having that smaller community slowly build worked, and worked in a way that to manage a treasury for that we expect to be accretive in value. So that was the thinking. It was kind of like an aha moment. I had been thinking through DeFi protocols, DeFi tokens for this. I thought through, well, maybe we can use NFTs as incentives and rewards. And then Nouns came, and I'm like, oh, let me smash these two together. And this feels like the vehicle I need.
I love that. And it's pretty contrarian, actually, if you think about it, like this approach, very, very slow membership build out, right?
Yeah, the other way fits the old model of just like throwing everything at the wall first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Trust me, I've had many thoughts of just kind of throwing something out there and seeing if it sticks, but I felt like I needed to be a little bit more intentional with something like this.
100%. I love it. And then also the Swiss wrapper around this, right? I think that's also super important. And the small body that will help shepherd this forward, like you're talking about. Again, everyone wants to have I don't want to say mob rule, but everyone wants to have one vote, one voice. And things become so noisy so quickly. And especially for the early stages of a project, having a small group of folks really kind of guide the way is like so crucial. It's so underappreciated. So kudos for you doing what you're doing. I just have a quick question, because when I heard about CherubsDAO, and especially the mission, was like, yes, finally, someone doing something that will have a huge potential real world impact on humanity using these tools, right? Like, it's really cool that artists are putting out their digital art. It's really cool that people are playing around with digital identity with these PFP projects. But then you have a lot of people that are like, what is this actually helping with, right? Even though art is beautiful and it helps further like the cultural aspect of humanity. But this is very, very clearly a high impact and benefit to society and humanity at large. Is there anyone else, any other projects on your radar doing something equally as impactful when it comes to tying in crypto and in real life impacts?
It's a good question. I have nothing that just jumps out. Like I've seen a fair number of projects, like, and it's good. And I looked at it and like, I'm glad they're doing that, but there's no sustainability behind it. Where, occasionally, and I know one of the first things Nouns funded was they did some nonprofit grants. And so you'll see a few projects here and there that will carve out some of their treasury and make some grants and feel like giving back. And I think that's fantastic. And several of those are tied to missions, that might have, something impact on, decarbonization. Climate change seems to be a very popular one. And so I've seen that from a mechanism standpoint, somebody, doing, what you asked, I not specifically. I mean, obviously Gitcoin is doing, fantastic stuff to fund, open source development. And I think that's a really interesting mechanism that's going to have a lot of benefit in that field. And I think the quadratic voting could have a lot of benefit funding other major causes, and perhaps they apply that to decarbonization and climate, which I hope they do. So that's an interesting mechanism that is working for directing that. But the resistance I've felt as I've gone out there, and some of the pushback I get when I promote this initially is you got to be careful if it's 100% nonprofit. Like, dude, hey, crypto is all about a greed chase, right? And people are going, trying to make as much money as fast as they can here. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's what it's all about, but there's certainly that aspect of the culture. But it did kind of check my thinking and said, you know what, I wonder if I'm going to get a lot more traction if I got to really challenge myself and not make this 100% nonprofit, but there needs to be, we need to kind of tie together capitalism and impact some way that's different. I do think that's where I think that is the potential of crypto overall. Is I think we have an opportunity to design systems and mechanisms that do respect the value that capitalism brings to the world, and I think there's immense value in that, but does it in a more thoughtful and inclusive way. And this is where people call it generative capitalism, or other terms are applied to it, but it is that fusing of profit and impact, and that both are important, and you need to think about your constituents with that. So that's where I got to. And so I think, at least now, like to pull off something with impact, I do think you still have to incorporate the financial return model to that, and not make it 100% just donations to get to the scale, at least, that I'm thinking about.
Makes sense to me, man. Honestly, it's like a relief that well-intentioned people like yourself, who like understand is sort of like the old world mechanisms and how to navigate through like Web3 and improve on those things. Like I feel like we're overdue for people like yourself entering the space with like good ambitions, like you were saying. Like, a lot of people who are thinking about this space really thoughtfully are thinking about how to extract as much money as humanly possible to like pad their wallets or whatever, and are quite good at it. But it's just really great to see people like yourself who are genuinely have good ambitions to try and harness this technology. One of the things we really love to ask our guests is, as NFT collectors ourselves and enthusiasts of the space, sort of pry into other people's wallets. Do you collect NFTs at all, or are there other projects? I know we've asked you about projects like related to yours. Are there any other things out there that are like totally unrelated to what you're doing that you just think are cool or interested in, or collect on your own, or what else do you see out there?
Yeah, I wish I could say I am not like yes, I do. I don't have a great eye for picking the I follow people like DC Investor and others. I'm just like, man, how do these guys like recognize that these things are so cool so early? The one I did grab, it's on my Twitter profile, is I got into the cryptodes, and I just loved it. So the thing I did love with nouns and cryptodes and Gremplin's part of the nouns as well is the Creative Commons licensing behind it. And I think that's an interesting experiment for the NFT drops to see, if you just kind of cede all rights to anybody, what this art can become. And the toad art was pretty interesting. So I grabbed that. And I didn't grab a noun. I followed it, but I did join the CherubsDAO. So if you're familiar with the nouns, you can, if you don't want to buy a noun, but you want to be an active part of the community, you can join a sub-DAO and buy tokens in the sub-DAO. And so the CherubsDAO was one of the first ones that did it. So I think they own like 4 or 5 nouns. So if you do want a voice in putting forth governance proposals, you can do it through that. Other than that, I've had intention to grab a couple of the the OGs, I guess. And I just have been reluctant to pull the trigger on it. And it turns out, I think it was a mistake, at the time, like looking at a Bored Ape, and not doing it, at what was a pretty high price. But I went down the rabbit hole when I first decided to go after NFTs. So I did get into the minting craze and the gas wars and all that. I just wanted to understand how this stuff worked and how NFTs were marketed and sold. And so I ended up with a bunch of Ethereans and some Rogue Society bots and a few others that are in my wallet right now. But the one I actually do love, and I've held it up and down. I bought the Cryptode. I think I got an offer for probably 6-7 times more than what I paid for it at one point in time, and it's it's come down quite a bit since then. But I just said I'm going to hold on to this thing. I just kind of like it.
What you love. I mean, rule number one.
Exactly.
And honestly, all you really need is one NFT with that CCO license enabled with it. I think long term, that's where the real value and innovation and just like amazing use cases come into everything. On top of like the crypto's looking just dank.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, Brian, before we leave, I just want to make sure you let people know where they can track and follow you and learn about any future updates when it comes to CherubsDAO. So let people know your social handles, websites, maybe key dates, launches, blah, 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 all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my Twitter handle is just my first initial and last name. So it's B Magierski. It's Magierski. CherubsDAO, you can find us on Twitter at CherubsDAO, all one word. And we are CherubsDAO.com as well. We have a testnet running right now where you can play with the cherubs. We have a playground. You can generate as many cherubs as you want and download them right now to try them out. That's just testnet.cherubsdao.com. We're migrating that over. It's on an Ethereum testnet. We're migrating it over to Polygon, and that testnet will be live soon. And we are community building. So on the website at CherubsDAO.com, you can find links to Twitter and Discord. We would love anybody to come into the Discord community and help us as we finish the last design tweaks and go through and build our community before launch. You'll be part of all the pre-launch fun stuff. And last thing I'll say is we are in active evaluation of doing a NFT drop pre-launch. And so this would be an NFT sale of unique clip art. So when we our first cut at the Cherubs, we came up with a clip art version that really informed what the final design was. And so we really love the art. We've gotten really good reviews from some NFT collectors on it. And we want to use that as a community building event that can build us a supporting community that maybe you can't afford to be part of the DAO itself based on what the daily auction price is, but this is a way to be part of the community and have a commemorative token. So we're designing that. We'll making announcements through our Twitter and Discord, probably in the coming weeks, how that will roll out. But ultimately we'll end up selling, probably up to 10,000 of those over a period of time to early community members. And we hope the commemorative value of, what CherubsDAO becomes, having a piece of the original artwork will become valuable.
I love that. And this is just such a fascinating conversation. I really want to thank you for being such an open book and really taking us back and educating us on everything that's preceded what you're doing, as well as how you're seeing the future and the large important implications of harnessing crypto technology, NFTs, for such an impactful cause like CherubsDAO is pursuing. So once again, just a big thank you for jumping on the Matthew and Rizzle show with us, and keep creating and innovating and doing amazing, beautiful things.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I love the show, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it now.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter, and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.